Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you are. I am André Diniz da Silva. I work for the National Statistical Office in Brazil, and I am leading the United Nations Regional Hub for Big Data that is hosted by the National Statistical Office, but serves Latin America and the Caribbean. I will be sharing this webinar today, so I will be here with you for the next 60 minutes. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the 5th webinar on the use of mobile phone big data for official statistics. It's a series of webinars. In the previous ones, we talked about opportunity and challenges of this kind of data source, the mobile phone big data for statistics. We talked also about the tourism, migration, and population statistics. So we have held by now 4 webinars. This one is the 5th one. So the webinars are organized by the UN Regional Hub for Big Data with the support of ECLAC, the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, especially through the Knowledge Transfer Network, and also with the support of the Brazilian Network Information Center, NICBR, that is the steering committee of the Internet in Brazil. Today we'll be talking about population statistics, but in the context of natural and human-made disasters. For that, we count on 3 guests, Mrs. Ayumi Arai from the University of Tokyo, Japan, Federico Segui from the National Statistical Office in Uruguay, and Siri Silme from the University of Tartu in Estonia. Ayumi is a researcher of the Research Center for Spatial Information Science of the University of Tokyo, where she is also co-leader of the Spatial Data Commons. She is an active member of UNCBD, the United Nations Committee of Experts in Big Data and Data Science for Official Statistics, and she is part of the Mobile Phone Data Task Team, and she's leading the Displacement and Disaster Statistics subgroup of the UNCBD Task Team. She's also a member of Disaster Risk Reduction Working Group that is part of the Intergovernmental Group on Earth Observation. Thank you, Ayumi, to be here with us to share your ideas, your thoughts. We will also talk to Federico Segui, who is Deputy Director General of the National Statistical Office in Uruguay. He is also the NSI's data steward and responsible for the implementation of the data warehouse. That's the system of integrated statistical register and service at the National Statistical Office. He has been consultant for several international organizations as an expert in official statistics, especially the ones based in administrative register, quality statistics, and also metadata and microdata anonymization. He is also author of several publications and papers on those topics. Thank you, Federico, to be here with us also today. And we are also counting on Siri. Siri is Associated Professor in Human Geography with the Mobility Lab in the Department of Geography of the University of Tartu. She has been participating since 2004 in developing mobile phone-based methodology and also conducting researches on the subject. Her research interests cover various topics related to spatial and temporal behavior of people. She studies ethnic and socio-economic segregation and mobility-related inequalities, sustainable travel behavior, cross-border mobility, tourism, and social networks. They will speak for about 15 minutes each, and we will have 15 more minutes at the end, 15 minutes more at the end for questions. I will ask you all to place your questions on the question panel because we'll bring that at the end. If it's possible, if you have time, we can also open the microphone at the end. Let's see how things goes. We thank ECLAC for the support of the UN Regional Hub for Big Data, especially the Knowledge Transfer Network, that is our partner in all the webinars we organize, and also some training as we do that remotely. The speakers for sharing their thoughts, and also to the audience for the interest. I will now pass the floor to Ayumi. Ayumi, you have the floor. Please feel free.
Thank you, Andrea. So I'll share my screen. Okay, can you see my slide?
Yeah, great.
Okay, thank you very much for the introduction. So today I was asked to mainly talk about the framework and also data nature of mobile phone data, and also the methodology for using mobile phone big data for displacement disaster statistics. So for this purpose, I will introduce a methodological guide. This is one of the methodological guides produced by the UNCBD Mobile Phone Data Task Team. Well, so we have 5 handbooks, methodological guide, dynamic population, migration, tourism, disaster, information society, and transport statistics. And this is one of the guide already published by UNCBD. So I'm presenting the displacement disaster subgroup handbook guide on behalf of on behalf of the team. So just sorry. Okay. So what are the displacement disaster statistics in our context for the methodological guide? So we define as a disaster as a serious disruption of the functioning of the community or society. So causing the widespread human, material, and economic or environmental losses. So which exceeds the ability of the affected community or society to cope using its own resources. So in this handbook, we focus on the statistic introduced in the statistics, particularly on population affected by disaster. And when we say disaster, it not only the natural disasters such as earthquake, flood, and hurricane, but also the pandemics. So let me talk about statistical framework in disaster context. So our task team is working on the use of mobile phone data for complementing official statistics that are collected by survey. So to be precise, disaster statistics not like our official statistics like migration statistics and transport statistics that have formal definition and methodological framework for data construction. But at this moment, we consider that the definition of disaster statistics depend on the demand and also the circumstances of the event. But we believe that the data is still important and needed for statistical system for managing disaster in countries. So we work on statistics and population affected by disaster. And we consider that these population are directly affected, that can be direct death or injured and disaster affected. And one of the most challenging population statistics among the official statistics, and it's also but at the same time, international community are working on the establishment of formal mechanism to advance a statistical framework on disaster-related statistics. So let me talk a little bit about the background. So there are increasing demand for disaster statistics and also increasing policy interest in measuring hazardous event and affected population, because conventional statistics is not sometimes it's not useful for understanding the quickly evolving situation, the disaster. And timely quality information is crucial for disaster risk reduction and also management. And national statistical offices play a crucial role in responding to such data demand. And there are high-level policy frameworks for addressing these data demands. For example, Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction, UNDR according to UNDR 2015, and 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, and also Paris Agreement. So these are closely related to Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goals 3 and 11. Then let's move on to the characteristics of mobile phone data, particularly in disaster context. Let me start with advantage. So mobile phone data can trace large population at the various scale of time and space, and also can capture quickly evolving situation in timely manner. And it can capture the mobility for long run, while the traditional data is not designed to capture the population situation of the people in the long term, and also wider space. And mobile phone data does not require mobile phone data require less logistical constraint for data collection if data access is granted. And actually, the population coverage is very high. It is almost 100% for developed country, and also in developing country, it is more than 90%. But at the same time, there are some limitations of mobile phone data in disaster context. For example, representativeness. So representativeness is also always a problem, and particularly mobile phone data is more often used by the wealthier population, and maybe the vulnerable population have mobile phone data, but they do not have a lot of record as much as the wealthier people have. So not only the number of devices represented by the wealthier population is larger. I mean, not only the number of devices covering the wealthier population is higher, but also the mobility pattern that can be captured by the mobile phone data will be well represented by the wealthier population. So there will be the representative problem. And also, but somehow the vulnerable population also have mobile phone data. So they are also there in the data set. And also, sometimes if it is a natural disaster, loss of signal due to the loss of cell tower would limit the data coverage. So that will also be the limitation of mobile phone data. Then let's move on to the overview of the guide. So the methodological guide we publish is summarizing the steps for responding the data demand to the use cases. So we highlight not only the methodology used for producing statistics, displacement and disaster statistics, but also we cover what is also necessary for producing such the statistics. So first, we start with the institutional framework. So institutional framework is very important, particularly for disaster context, because before the disaster, if we have an institutional framework, we can establish partnership for accessing the data. So by the time of the disaster, we already secure the data access. And also, it's relatively easier to discuss the policy relevance for using mobile phone data at the time of disaster, because usually at the time of disaster, timely data is not really available, but if you already have institutional framework, it is easier to agree on using that existing framework and infrastructure for producing timely data. And once you have institutional framework, I mean, this is a kind of partnership establishment. You also have a data pipeline. Data pipeline is the infrastructure for processing mobile phone data and produce statistics for policy purposes. So usually the data pipeline is set up in the data producer's premise. And if you already have a institutional framework, you also have a data pipeline. So that these if you have institutional framework and data pipelines, it's relatively easier to use existing infrastructure for at the time of disaster. So once you have an infrastructure, then we can discuss how to produce statistical information from mobile phone data. So one of the important aspects for processing the data is data protection measures. So we need to comply with legal framework, and no individually identifiable information will be included. Okay. Sorry, one slide is missing. Okay. Okay, sorry. Okay, then after ensuring the data privacy, before starting the statistical data production, we work with the data quality assurance to make sure that the data used for the analysis can capture the pattern or changes we want to understand from the data. Then, after examining the validity, we produce statistical data from mobile phone data. So later on, I will explain what kind of methodology we summarize for producing statistical data from mobile phone data. And after producing the data, result dissemination stage, so we share statistical output with end users. So I would like to highlight that the individual level data will never leave the premise of the data producer, and only aggregated statistics will be shared by the end user. So I will not go in detail about country cases, but I will quickly mention 2 country cases to explain what kind of statistic we introduce in the handbook. So in the case of Haiti earthquake, as mentioned in the previous slide, we also highlight the importance of partnership and data pipeline. So in Haiti case, Flowminder and Haiti, it is a mobile phone operator, have a long-standing relationship for 2010 earthquake and also for 2010 earthquake. So they can utilize that framework for working with other disaster happened in 2016 and also 2020. And also they have pre-existing data pipeline, and they have a software installed, a software called FlowKit. So they employ this infrastructure to rapidly produce initial mobility aggregates. And of course, data are anonymized and no personally identifiable information was included. And they comply with EU GDPR data processed on the digital Haiti premise. And in this context, this use case was used for explaining, demonstrating a methodology for capturing displacement induced by disaster, because earthquake of August 2021 led to population displacement and significant changes in mobility. So we summarize the process in the 5 steps, establish the baseline and data quality assurance. And once we examine the data quality. We detect the home location before the event and after event so that we can compute transition matrix. So detailed methodology is explained in the hand guide, but we summarize that this is like essence of data processing for detecting displacement. I will not mention this slide. And second one is the impact of mobility restriction due to COVID in the Gambia. So in this case, we also have a existing partnership for using mobile phone data, but especially focusing on the internal migration. So there was some partnership between the National Statistical Office, regulator, and 2MNO, and World Bank and University of Tokyo. And at the time of the COVID onset, we already have analytical pipeline and also code for producing mobility statistics. So these are already available. So the stakeholder agree on the relevance of using existing framework, and that's why utilized for producing mobility statistics and understand how the mobility restriction impacted population mobility under the pandemic. And of course, the data are anonymized and aggregated. And in this case, we don't have any, we follow the legal framework discussed between the Gambia government, because we don't have data protection agency in this country. But data was processed in the regulator's premise, and aggregated results are shared with National Statistical Office. In this case, use case was used for highlighting the method for measuring changes in mobility, mobility level, because restriction imposed as a containment measure, and it changed a lot of mobility level. So we highlight the first step is the same. We establish the baseline and also data quality assurance, and compute distance travel before and after the event, and assess changes in the mobility level. So these statistics are used for examining the changes induced by the health disaster. So I will skip this slide. So as a summary, so besides the methodological framework for computing statistics, we highlight the importance of institutional framework analytical pipeline that is set before the disaster event, because it can enhance the preparedness and also response capacity, and reduce the response burden of the government, particularly for responding data demand. And at the end, in the long run, it can accelerate the use of mobile phone data for official statistics. And we also have to say that the security data access remains still a challenge. So we also highlight the importance of alternative data sources, because using this kind of data can demonstrate the usefulness of high frequency data, and maybe help us to open the door of using the new data sources for official statistics in the later stage. And also, innovation in analytical method is still needed to improve the robustness estimated from the sparse and mobile phone data. This is the end of my presentation, and thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Ayumi. You have been doing a great job. It's really useful for National Statistical Office. I really believe that it's important to leverage the use of mobile phone big data for statistics. Thank you very much. I will pass now the floor to Federico.
Thank you, Andrea. Let me share the screen. I hope you can see.
Yeah.
Okay. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to everyone. I'm delighted to be here thanks to IBC and UN for the invitation. Today, I will share the experience of Uruguay on using mobile data during the COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. the objectives of this work were to start experimental production of statistics from administrative records or call detailed records provided by the mobile network operators in Uruguay, and to provide updated and high frequency information to the National Emergency System or SINAE during the COVID-19 pandemic and other disasters. It is the first experience of the NSI of Uruguay working with this type of information. Also, I think one of the first in the Latin America region. And the rationale analyze population mobility during disasters and forced displacements, generate more frequent mobility statistics and at a lower cost, make estimates in small areas, strengthen capacities for planning sustainable urban mobility, make estimating immigration and tourist statistics, and produce basic population statistics like planning of the population census, monitoring of population fluctuation, and urban planning. Let's see the market share of mobile subscribers by MNO in Uruguay. There are 3 companies. Antel is the national public company. It has around 50% of the market share. And the private sector is divided by Telefónica Movistar with 33% of the market, and Claro with 20%. During the COVID-19 pandemic, we received data from Antel, the public company, on this format, and overnight activity matrix per day with 6 columns: the date, the origin location, the department or province of the country, and town or neighborhood in the case of Montevideo, and destination location, and quantity of cell phones displaced from the origin to the destination, taking into account some data protection elements, like if there are less than 15 cell phones in that cell, the displayed value will be 15. So this matrix shows the number of cell phones, maybe people, moving from one place to another by date. We receive this aggregated data. So for us, it is not a big data project. The big data analysis and processes are run at the MNO companies. Due to we receive data from Antel company, the public company only, we couldn't disseminate the data. We should have the 3 companies' data, but we use it to produce experimental statistics and for the SINAE, the National Emergency System, to monitor how people is moving or following the recommendations of staying at home. I have to say that in Uruguay was not mandatory to stay at home during the pandemic. Let's see some definition, methodology. We define as overnight stay when the cell phone stayed for at least 4 hours between 10 p.m. and 7 a.m. during the night before of the reference date. The primary activity is when the cell phone was in use for at least 3 hours between 8 a.m. and 7 p.m. on the reference date. The reference days of the information are Wednesday and Sunday of each week, monthly delivery. Here we have some dashboards we have developed to present the data and to monitor the movement of the mobile devices. You can select in the main window, you can select the origin area or a neighborhood of Montevideo. And in the window below, you may see the top 5 destination areas with the quantities of mobile devices. Also, here in the table on the right, you can see the full ranking, of destination areas. Also, the dates selected. Here, other screenshot from the dashboard with the detailed information of the selected area. These dashboards were inspired in the INE of Spain experience or dashboards that they developed. Other charts and what are the learned lessons and challenges? We need to involve the telco regulatory authority called URSEC. In fact, we are in this process right now trying to get the data through URSEC, also creating incentives for the MNOs. One option could be paid for data, but it could be an option, but it's not in our plans for now. INE of Spain is paid for this data. I think it's something like the 2,000 euros per day per MNO. And the other option is generate market share information with high frequency and timeliness, integrate information from MNOs with the continued household survey. And
Federico, sorry to interrupt you. You have a gray area on your slides. I thought that it was my PC, but I have seen in the chat that people see the same. Could you unshare and share again your slides? Okay. The gray area has moved. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry. I'm seeing my cell phone, so I couldn't see the chat. Sorry.
Okay.
No problem. What else? Generate share reference maps and data, a technical assistance for the generation of statistics and their analysis, and to avoid the excessive burden to MNOs. The NSI should be the only channel for the government agencies to request information for statistical purposes. And as I mentioned it, that the strategy we are following is to take the advantage of the particular case of Uruguay, that Antel is a state-owned company. It facilitated the access to data within the framework of the national statistical system. It made it possible to carry out pilot tests and to define more clearly the information requirements. Approach to private MNOs through the Communication Regulatory Authority, or SEC, and make data requests for statistical purposes from public institutions through the NSI. Well, thank you very much. Just a final message. Remember, the Festival de Datos will be in November in Punta del Este. I applied for a session by 23rd of April. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federico. Very well done to remind to send a reminder on the Festival de Datos. Thank you very much. And now we have a use case of mobile phone data. I think that joint with the guidelines and the next thoughts of city will be really great for the region, and also outside of the region. I started thinking about applying the use of MPD for statistics. Now I give the floor to Siri. Siri, feel free to share your presentation.
Hello, everybody. Can you see the slides?
Yeah, very well. Thank you.
Very good. Then I talk this our experience of studying. 1 minute, I change this. Study of spatial and temporal patterns of Ukrainian refugees in Estonia, and we used for that this mobile positioning data. And this study is done together with my colleagues from Mobility Lab, Ago Toming and Tiit Tamaro. And the motivation of this study was the Russian invasion to Ukraine in February 2022, and when this millions of refugees have left Ukraine, and one destination country for these refugees is Estonia. And we understand that at Estonia and also the other receiving countries have no clear overview of this refugees, where they come to country, but where they are staying and how they change the places of residence, and there is not very much information about this. And in case of Estonia, we had problem or the ministries of Estonia would like to know in spring 2022 that where this children of these Ukrainian refugees goes to school, and where they have this permanent place of residence. This was why they asked to use this mobile phone data to answer this sort of questions. And for that, the objective of this our study was to answer the questions that how has the visits from Ukraine origin people in Estonia changed, and which is the spatial distribution and the mobility of these people, and how it changed during the time they stayed here in Estonia. And for that, we had mobile phone data from 3 study period. First, we had one part of data for this pre-COVID period from 2017 to 2018, then COVID period from 2020 to 2022, and then we selected this period after this Russian invasion to Ukraine, which is from February 2022. And also based on this study, I can a little discuss that what is the advantages and the challenges in using the mobile positioning data in studying the refugees. We haven't done this sort of study before. We have studied in regularly different sort of mobility behavior of people from mobile data, but not exactly this refugees part. And we used passive mobile positioning data from one mobile network operator, which is the inbound roaming data. The visitors who comes to Estonia, and there is the data it describes this was the DDR data. It is like call activities there, and also the data transfer the main, like the main data was the time and the location when the call activity were done. And we use for the study the methodology which is developed together with company Positium, which is the company who is developing different statistics and developing methodology from mobile positioning data. And we use some definitions, or we calculated the visits for the users or the people, which is the period from the first call activity until the last call activity in Estonia. And we use the same methodology which is described in one publication all over 2000 and others 2020. And we calculated the place of residence. We usually have used like 1 month period, and more difficult model for calculating place of residences. But for this refugee study, we defined the place of residence as the municipality where the person has spent most nights in the 2 weeks period, because some of the people or the visits are shorter, not so long, and then we shorten this period for the 2 weeks, not use this 1 month period. And we also discussed that we can do, we didn't do it in this study, but we can divide it, Ukraine refugees to the visitors who have been in Estonia before this war started, and the visitors who haven't been in Estonia. And for some results, what we got for this study was to analyze the arrivals of people from Ukraine, mobile positioning based data. When it's can see that beginning of March there was a big increase. It is this light line is for mobile positioning data, and the more huge increase was based on the border control data. But here you can see that both databases have the increase from the beginning of March, or when the war started in Ukraine. And based on the mobile positioning data, here we used, it is not generalized to the full population, but it is for this one population numbers on this graph. And here is one increase in the beginning of June, and then I can discuss it more end of this presentation, why it should be in this big increase there, which is doesn't look like very logical. And there we calculated the number of people from Ukraine who stayed here, and how many people are. Can see that in the April is the peak of Ukraine's refugees in Estonia, and the highest peak is in June. And when we compare it, the number of people from the previous years, can see that for 2017 and 2018, or 2017 and 2020 and 2021, there is quite there is not big changes during the different months, but there is big increase in summer months in 2018, which is we think that it is related to these temporary workers. There are many of Ukraine's temporary workers comes to this in Estonia from this agricultural farms and help in summertime. But in 2022, after this Russian invasion to Ukraine, the number is much more higher than in previous years. Then we calculated the duration of the visits and compared these 3 periods, and can say that this median value of this duration was highest on this period of Russian invasion to Ukraine. The median is 1 day and 18 hours, but then it's the 75 percentile is 8 days, which is higher than this previous, the pre-COVID period or this COVID period. And on the graph, you can also see that there is the number of days decreases when it's there is less people for this longer period stayed here. And there would be different reasons for that. And then we find this preliminary home municipality that when they come to Estonia, and when was the first 2 weeks the main destination. And on this graph you can see that 42% of the Ukraine refugees stayed in the capital city of Tallinn, which is where the highest number of also Estonian population, and it is the highest or the largest city in Estonia. And the other municipalities, the percentage of Ukraine refugees was less than 8%. And here comes out some bigger cities, Pärnu, the city, and Tartu, and also the one island, Saaremaa, which is have a little more than other municipalities. And then we found the change of the municipality when they come to Estonia, the first home municipality, and then the last one. It depends on the visits. It means that each people have been different time, and on this map then have based on each individual calculated the last home municipality. And based on this, we can say that 80% of refugees stayed in the same settlement unit where they arrived, and 90% stayed same municipality, and 95% stayed same county. It means that they doesn't change the home or the home place a lot. And on the map you can see that if they change it, then they moved more to this bigger cities, this Tallinn or Tartu or the surrounding areas, and more they left from rural municipalities. And if they changed, that means that 20% changed the settlement units and 5% changed the county. It mostly moved to this Tallinn or the surrounding area. And then we compare the municipalities where the Ukraine's refugees were in before this Russian invasion to Ukraine, to more understand that are they going to the same municipalities where usually the Ukrainians stayed in Estonia. And the pictures or the maps are quite similar. That in Tallinn, the both cases was 42% of Ukrainians before. It is like the usual or the regular mobility of Ukrainians in Estonia, and also the after. Based on this map, we can say that they are more went to these areas when before also the Ukrainians have the larger communities or have some connections. For example, in this Saaremaa county here, or Pärnu or Tartu, where they have some connections and they have some networks there. And also based on this, what the mobile phone data allows to study was that which municipalities Ukraine's refugees visits. Before I showed this where they had this permanent or the main home anchor point or the home place, but now we also can look where they moved during this stay here. And before this Ukraine war, there was the main municipalities was coming out the same, but there's coming out the main roads, which is from Pärnu to Tallinn, which is the municipalities between or from Tartu to Tallinn, that they more moved from the main roads. But after this Russian invasion to Ukraine, there are more from the suburban areas around this bigger cities, and there are less people went to these border areas and islands. And for discussion, based on this study, you can say that disadvantages for using mobile positioning data for studying the refugees is monitoring that we can monitor the spatial locations and the persistence within the destination country, and we can look more precisely these locations and how they moved inside the country. But there are a lot of challenges to compare to this usual, for example, to study the commuters or the cross-border movers or tourists, because there is the unusual situation of people's behavior, and also for the wider content of this. For example, this mobile operators can allow the free calls of the refugees, or they can they don't use maybe so much this roaming network for coming here, if they can get a lower price for this local operators service, and they also can use local SIM cards instead of roaming. And for this map or this graph that I showed before, there was a big increase in this end of June, and it was a strange situation that there was a big increase in this number of Ukrainians from this roaming network on the end of June, but after that, from this July, they all disappeared from this operators networks. It means that after the July, we had this roaming data from this the same operator, but there wasn't any Ukrainians anymore there. It shows that we can't do the statistics for after the July, because there is something happens. They change the contracts or they change this the roaming who they use, because Estonia we have 3 main mobile operator companies, and they somehow changed the roaming company which the Ukrainians roaming have contract. And this is the one situation which is strange, which haven't happened in this usual regular statistics cases when we have used this mobile data before. And this is all from my side.
Thank you very much, Siri. Now we have not only the guidelines, but 2 use cases. So it's very inspiring for the ones that want to start a project on the use of mobile phone data for statistics. I am just having a look into the chat. Garcia, just saying, all the panelists have access to the chat, so if you wanted to have a look into that. But Garcia is saying, hello, I work at the Weather Prediction Center at INPE, and we are planning to use mobile phone data or data from other sources, IoT, to adjust and improve the accuracy of some of our weather forecasting models using artificial intelligence. We plan to start in the northeast part of Brazil, probably. Does anyone know if there is a public source of data, I mean a free source of data for research purposes? The data should be location, data, time, and some meteorological data, example, temperature, pressure, etc. Any of you, the panelists, want to have a quick answer for that? It's about open data sources that could contain location, date, time, and some meteorological data, like such as temperature, pressure. I know it's a bit out of the subject right now because we are talking about mobile phone data, but okay. I don't see other question for the moment, but I do have a question. It's driven to Federico and the city, but Ayumi, if you want to comment, I will be more than happy. It's about data access. We know that mobile phone data is privately held data, so we needed to negotiate with the owners. We know that for the common statistics that may help people but don't save lives, is not an easy task to negotiate data access with the companies. But for using that for preventing and helping people, preventing disaster or mitigate the effects of disaster may be a reason that may sensitize more the companies. So for Siri and Federico, was it easier to negotiate data access with the companies once you wanted to use that for this kind of purpose, or when you negotiate a data access, it was general for the general use, so you don't know if it was a reason why you got access to the data? And Yumi, if you wanted to comment on data access, it will be more than welcome. Thank you.
I can comment. The first that in the University of Tartu we had this data access to this GDPR in 2019. It was a different sort of data, but after that it was more like this companies have to more think about all these privacy things, and then this legal things doesn't change, but that the thinking or this they think more about these definitions, what is the anonymous and what is the pseudonymous. We have the big discussion because in previous time, I think there wasn't this term so actual, or they didn't use this pseudonymous. It means that operators is doing this data to add these user IDs, but the researchers don't know exactly who they are and they can't connect for the numbers, for the mobile phone numbers, but only the operators can do it. And this was the discussion in Estonia for this data access. But in case of this disaster or this crisis management, we had the situation on this COVID period that all this government and they discussed that we need the data to use it to understand that where the people move, and also that which the first one that was also the discussion that which maybe we should to close or to do the restrictions only some parts of Estonia, that the people move more different areas, and if we close for some area, then this COVID doesn't move out of there. And then was the situation that this was the company Positium developed this methodology to how to find the statistics, and all these mobile operators use the same methodology, and then the statistics of Estonia put it together to like one platform that they can combine it. But there had to be the previous workflow or how they do this methodology. And there was the difference between, as we have used the statistics before, because before we have developed this statistics for this company Positium did it, or in university we found it like the researchers, but now was the situation different because the mobile operators have to calculate it, and exactly we didn't know how they exactly did it. We had this the general framework and the methodology, but how they did and how it can combine, this was like new situation, how to solve this problem, because they didn't want to give the data out from the company.
Thank you very much, Siri. Do you want to comment on that, Federico?
Thank you, Andrea. I think the data protection is not a problem. We receive aggregated data. The MNOs see this like for them it's a business. I mean, they want to sell data. So and they say you are trying to destroy our business if we share this data for free. So I think it's a balance between a stick and a carrot. We can force them by law to share the data, but we don't want to do that. I mean, it could be for during a disaster, and I'm sure they will share the data again as they did during the pandemic. But we want to use the data for other purposes, like children statistics or urban planning or transportation planning or whatever. So I think we need to, in our case, to involve the regulatory authority, the RSEC, to go through them to get the data from the three companies and convince them that this kind of project, the collaboration project, could improve the quality of data and also promote the use of data, and also they can sell the data for other private companies. So that's my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federico. Ayumi, do you want to comment on this point, or if you prefer to join to jump on the question that's on the chat that Esperanza has already made up some answer about the timeliness of a response. So Esperanza says that's why it's very important to have the pipeline.
Okay. Regarding, I would just want to comment about the access quickly. So we have similar cases in several countries, and mostly when the MNO, mobile network operator, cooperate with us, is that the regulator can explain how the data is useful, and also the MNO can see some the gain from the cooperation. For example, they don't know how exactly data can be used for their business at that moment, but they are very curious how these data are actually used by the government in their country. So that it seems like that is also the motivation. And also their concern is also the privacy, but also the cost of the processing the data. So they are relatively, when we talk about processing the data, they are reluctant because they don't have a lot of resources. But when we say, we have free software and we can provide a training, then they are relatively happy to work with us because they also can gain something by working with this project. So that's a quick comment.
Thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much. We have passed a bit of the time. I will just advertise the next webinar. I will take the speakers for today and the audience, but I will just before advertise the next webinar. We go on talking about the using of mobile phone data next month on May 4th, and it's gonna be on information society statistics. So I invite everybody to be here. For the end, I thank you very much, Siri, Federico, and Ayumi for being speakers today and share with us your thoughts on the use of mobile phone data for disasters management. And see you next month, hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.